The thing about the old Hadley place, the real thing you gotta understand before anything else, is that it wasn't haunted. Not in the way people mean when they use that word. Like it's some kind of spooky amusement park ride. Ghosts, from what I've come to learn, are passive things. Echoes. They might moan or rattle a chain, but they're just replaying a tape of their worst moment, stuck in a loop they can't escape. The house on Hemlock Creek Road was something else entirely. It was awake, it was aware, and it wasn't replaying anything. It was always hunting. My brother Leo was the one who insisted we go in. It was the summer of '98, a season that smelled of cut grass, gasoline, and the damp, earthy breath of the Ohio woods behind our neighborhood. We were 16, bored out of our skulls. Our world bounded by the video store and the town limits. The local legend of Old Man Hadley was our favorite piece of local color. The story went that Elias Hadley, a reclusive clockmaker, went nuts one night in the 1940s, bricked his wife and 2 daughters into the basement root cellar, and then hanged himself from the porch rafters. A classic, right? The kind of story you tell in a hushed voice around a campfire, trying to make your friends jump. "It's just a story, Mikey," Leo said, his voice full of that easy, infuriating confidence I'd spent my life chasing. He stood at the edge of the property line, shining his heavy-duty mag light across the buckled porch. The wood groaned under his gaze, a long, low sound that seemed to come not from the structure, but from the soil it was built on. Probably just some kids from the high school broke in, got spooked by a raccoon in the wall, and their imaginations did the rest. I shuffled my feet, the uncut lawn soaking my worn-out sneakers with cold dew. The late afternoon sun was bleeding out behind the trees, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. But the house seemed to absorb the light, a hulking, Victorian silhouette that grew darker and more solid as the world around it dimmed. "I don't know, Leo," Mom said. The mailman quit his route because he saw a little girl in a white dress, standing in the upstairs window, waving at him. "Not in a friendly way," Leo snorted, not taking his eyes off the house. "Mom also believes that placing amethysts on her forehead aligns her chakras and that her horoscope is a legitimate life guide. Come on, it's a building. Wooden nails live a little." He was right, of course, about Mom. But as I looked up at the house, I felt a wrongness that had nothing to do with ghost stories. The windows weren't just broken. They were like black, sightless eyes, and the way the roof sagged in the middle made the entire structure look like it was frowning down at us. It wasn't just derelict, it was diseased, a cancer on the landscape. Leo, emboldened by my silence, marched forward, and I followed, because I always followed. He pried open a window around back, its frame splintering, with a shriek that sent a flock of crows exploding from the skeletal branches of a dead oak tree in the yard. The smell that rolled out was thick and complex, not just the expected mildew and rat droppings, but something underneath, something organic, sweet and coppery, like old meat left in the sun and a handful of pennies. We climbed into a kitchen frozen in time. Our flashlight beams cut through a darkness so complete it felt solid, a physical substance we had to push through. Dust motes danced in the light like frantic insects. The floor was a museum of decay, shattered china, curled photographs with faces bleached away by time, the tiny bones of birds and squirrels scattered about, but there were no cobwebs. I remember that clearly, and it stuck with me. In a place that had been empty for over 50 years, there wasn't a single spiderweb. It was as if nothing else living was permitted to stay. "See?" Leo whispered, his bravado slightly diminished by the sheer weight of the silence. "Nothing. Just a dump." We moved into the main hallway, a wide, grand space that must have been beautiful once. A staircase swept up into the gloom. Our footsteps were muffled, swallowed by the oppressive quiet. That was the second thing I noticed. A house this old, this decrepit, should be a symphony of tiny sounds. The sigh of settling timber, the scuttling of pests in the walls, the wind whistling through cracks. There was nothing. It was as if the house was holding its breath, waiting. That's when the temperature dropped. It wasn't a draft from a broken window. It was a plunge, a sudden, shocking cold that stabbed through my thin t-shirt and raised goosebumps on my arms. My breath plumed in the beam of my flashlight, a ghostly signal in the stagnant air. "You feel that?" I whispered, my voice trembling, betraying the fear I was trying so hard to hide. Leo just nodded, his jaw tight. He pointed his light down the hall toward the grand staircase. At the top, a shadow flickered. Not a person-shaped shadow, not a silhouette of a man or a woman. It was just a patch of deeper darkness that seemed to bleed away from the wall, swirl for a moment like ink in water, and then vanish back into the plaster. My heart was a frantic drum against my ribs. "Leo, we should go now. This isn't right." "We just got here," he said, but his voice was thin, stripped of its earlier conviction. He took a step forward, a brave, stupid step toward the stairs. And as his foot came down on a warped floorboard, the entire house let out a sound. It wasn't a groan or a creak. It was a sigh. A deep, weary human sigh that seemed to emanate from the very walls around us, from the floor beneath our feet, from the air itself. It was a sound of profound exhaustion, and underneath that, a bottomless, gnawing hunger. We froze. The beam of my flashlight danced wildly as my hands shook. Then the walls began to bleed. Not blood, a dark sap-like substance, thick as molasses, began to ooze from between the slats of the peeling floral wallpaper. It gathered in glistening beads that trembled for a moment before tracing sluggish, deliberate paths downward. The sweet coppery smell intensified, becoming a physical presence, a taste in the back of my throat that made me want to gag. "What the hell?" Leo breathed, his bravado finally crumbling. He took a step back, his shoulder bumping into mine. A door at the end of the hall, which I could have sworn was sealed shut by grime and time, was now slightly ajar. From within, a faint, warm, golden light spilled out, painting a soft yellow rectangle on the filthy floorboards. It was a stark and impossible contrast to the cold, dark decay that surrounded us. It looked safe. It looked welcoming. Curiosity, that fatal human flaw, overpowered our primal fear. We were moths, and that light was the flame. We moved toward it, our steps slow and hesitant. The door led to a study. A fire crackled merrily in a large stone fireplace, casting dancing shadows across floor-to-ceiling bookshelves. A single Tiffany lamp on a desk cast a soft, kaleidoscopic glow on a worn leather armchair. The room was pristine, warm, and inviting. It was a perfect preserved pocket of the past, a sanctuary. Sitting in the armchair was a man. He was gaunt, his skin so pale it was almost translucent, stretched tight over the prominent bones of his skull. He wore an old-fashioned, dusty suit, and his hands, resting on the arms of the chair, were long and bony, the fingers tapping a slow, silent rhythm. He looked up as we entered, and his eyes were the color of tarnished silver, flat and reflective. He didn't smile. "You're in my house," he said. His voice was dry, raspy, like leaves skittering across pavement. Leo, ever the brave one, found his voice. It was a cracked and fragile thing. We're sorry, sir. We didn't think anyone lived here." "Oh, I live here," the man said. His head tilted slightly, a bird-like motion that was deeply unsettling. "We all do. It's just a matter of where." He gestured with one of those skeletal hands, not at us but at the wall beside the fireplace. My eyes, desperate for any anchor in this madness, followed his gesture. It took a moment for my brain to understand what it was seeing. The wallpaper pattern here wasn't a floral print or paisley. It was a repeating pattern of faces. Human faces, their features subtly raised in the material, their mouths open in silent, eternal screams. They were horrifically, undeniably real. I saw the panic in their wide wallpaper eyes, the desperate strain of their necks as they tried to pull away from the plaster. They were trapped, woven into the very fabric of the house. A low, wet cracking sound came from the hallway behind us, like someone walking through deep mud. We spun around. The oozing substance from the hall had thickened, and now it was pulling itself from the walls, forming into glistening, man-shaped silhouettes that shambled toward the study door. They had no features, no discernible limbs, just a shifting, viscous darkness that reflected the firelight in oily rainbows. They moved with a terrible, patient purpose. The house wasn't haunted. It was a digestive system. It lured you in with its silence, its weirdness, and then it showed you the comfortable room, the warm fire, the friendly host. It offered you a place to stay, forever. The man in the chair began to change. His polite, gaunt features slackened, his jaw unhinged with a soft, wet pop, and his form seemed to dissolve at the edges, merging with the fabric of the chair, with the very air of the room. The warm golden light began to dim, not to darkness, but to the same deep, hungry blackness of the things in the hall. "Run!" Leo screamed. It was the last clear human command I would ever hear. We burst out of the study and back into the freezing hallway. The sap creatures reached for us with dripping arms. I felt a cold, wet touch on my ankle. A sensation like being grabbed by a handful of freezing mud and rotting leaves, and it pulled with an impossible hydraulic strength. I screamed, a raw animal sound, and ripped my leg away, my sneaker tearing at the heel and staying behind, swallowed instantly by the thing's shifting form. We didn't head for the kitchen. We ran for the front door. A massive oak thing barred shut with an iron crossbeam the size of my arm. Leo, in a surge of adrenaline-fueled strength I didn't know he possessed, grabbed the bar and heaved. It didn't budge. It was as if it had been welded in place. "It's no use," a small, flat voice said. We looked down. A little girl no more than 8 was sitting on the bottom step of the staircase. She wore an old-fashioned white dress and was translucent, flickering like a bad TV signal. She was the first echo, the first real ghost we'd seen, a remnant of the house's previous meals. "The house is hungry," she said, her voice devoid of any emotion. "It always eats. It likes the brave ones best. They have more flavor. Their light is brighter." She looked directly at Leo, and for a moment I saw a flicker of pity in her ghostly eyes. "It's already tasting you." Behind us, the study door slammed shut with a finality that shook the floor, and the warm light vanished, plunging us back into the absolute blackness, broken only by our frantic, darting flashlight beams. The shuffling, wet sounds of the sap creatures grew closer, now accompanied by a new sound, a soft, sucking noise like a mouth savoring a morsel. The walls themselves seemed to be pressing in, the sighing sound returning, now a chorus of them, a symphony of consumption coming from every direction. Leo did the only thing he could think of. He smashed his mag light against the large, grime-caked window next to the front door. The glass, thick and old, only cracked into a spiderweb pattern. He hit it again and again, screaming with the effort, a primal roar of defiance. A sliver of cool, fresh night air whistled through the crack. The smell of the outside world, wet grass and freedom, was the most beautiful scent I had ever experienced. Hope, sharp and painful, pierced my terror. I turned to keep the things at bay with my light, but the beams seemed to have no effect. They just absorbed the light, growing darker, more solid. The sweet, meaty smell was overwhelming, coating my tongue in the back of my throat. With a final, desperate roar, Leo put his shoulder through the cracked glass, tearing a hole big enough to crawl through. Jagged shards tore his jacket and his skin, but he didn't seem to feel it. He shoved me first. "Go, Mikey, go!" I tumbled out into the wet. Blessed grass, the clean, cold air a shock to my system. I scrambled to my feet, my one shoeless foot sinking into the mud, and turned back, reaching for my brother. He was halfway out, his torso through the broken window, when the sap-like tendrils from inside wrapped around his legs, his waist. They weren't sharp or violent. They were possessive. His eyes met mine, wide with a terror I had never seen in him before, a look that stripped away all his confidence and left only a terrified boy. "Mikey," he started, his voice choked. Then he was yanked back, not with a jerk, but with a slow, inexorable pull, as if the house itself was a giant mouth and he was being swallowed. His fingers, clawing at the windowsill, left deep, desperate grooves in the rotten wood before they, too, were dragged back into the darkness. His scream was cut off not by distance, but by absorption, as if the silence of the house had simply swallowed it whole. The front door swung open. Not violently, not with a bang, but slowly, smoothly, politely, invitingly. I stood there frozen for what felt like an eternity. I could hear nothing from inside. No struggle, no screams, just that profound, hungry silence. The house stood before me, a dark, patient predator. And the worst part, the part that haunts me more than any monster, was that I felt a pull, a terrible soul-deep urge to go back in, to find my brother, to not let him be in that warm, dark study alone. The house was offering me a place too, but the little girl's ghost flickered into view again, just for a second, in the upstairs window next to the one Leo had broken. She shook her head slowly, her eyes full of an ancient, weary sadness that no child should ever possess. That broke the spell. I ran through the brambles and the woods, branches whipping my face and tearing at my clothes, not stopping, not feeling the cuts or the cold, until I collapsed on our own manicured lawn, sobbing and vomiting up the lingering taste of that house. The police didn't believe me. Who would? A story about a hungry house, a melting man, and wallpaper made of faces. They searched the place, of course. They brought dogs and high-powered lights. They found nothing. No signs of struggle, no Leo, no ooze, no cozy study, just an empty, decaying old building. They found my torn sneaker near the back window and concluded I'd gotten scared. Torn my shoe, and in my hysterical state, fabricated a story to cover for my brother who'd probably just run away. I was just a traumatized kid with an overactive imagination. My parents' hearts broke in two different ways. Mom wanted to believe me, to wrap me in the safety of her crystals and horoscopes, but the evidence was against me. Dad just thought I'd cracked under some unknown pressure. We never spoke of Leo again. The house had taken him twice, once from the world and once from our memory. I never went back. I moved away the second I turned 18 and never looked back. I changed my last name, started over on the West Coast, and tried to build a life on a foundation of quiet, normal terror. I live in a modern apartment with concrete walls and floor-to-ceiling windows. No wallpaper, but the house never left me. It's in my dreams, in the way I jump at sudden silences, in the way I can never ever feel truly alone in a room. Then last week, 30 years to the day after Leo vanished, I got a letter in the mail. There was no return address, just my name and address printed in a faint spidery script. Inside was a single square piece of yellowed wallpaper. The pattern was a repeating one, of faces. And in the center, clear as day, woven into the fibrous material, was my brother Leo's face. It was older than the 16-year-old boy I'd lost, lined with 3 decades of a terror I can't comprehend. His mouth was open in a silent scream. His eyes, those same eyes that had met mine with such final terror, were now begging for a release that will never, ever come. I burned the paper in my sink, the smoke smelling faintly of old meat and pennies. But it was too late. And last night, as I was trying to sleep, the sounds of the city, a comforting hum outside my window, I heard it. Faint at first, a vibration more than a noise, then growing clearer. Not from outside my window, but from the walls of my own apartment. A deep, weary, familiar sigh, followed by the soft, wet sound of something shifting in the spaces between the drywall. The house on Hemlock Creek Road is awake. It's finished digesting its main course. It's had 30 years to savor my brother's courage. And after all this time, it's decided it's still hungry. It's crossed a continent to find me. Now it's time for dessert.